At all. Good evening.
Good evening.
I know you all have to wear the mask, and I have mine, but I'm gonna stay up here far from, more than 6 feet away from everybody, um, and take advantage of the pleasure of addressing you this evening. I want to say, first of all, congratulations to the new executive. As I believe I heard the new president say just now, there's a lot of work that we have to do. And the truth is, this evening, I don't want to be very long. I really feel more and more that it's less the time for speeches and more the time for action. One of the things that COVID-19 has shown us is that everything we plan to do, this Barbados Labour Party government came in on a platform of enfranchisement. And we've, over the last 2 years, been executing that platform, executing that mandate. But the truth is that COVID has shown us that we need to do a lot more with a lot less. Everybody has heard the numbers, and the truth is I don't want this to be an evening that's about numbers. But I don't think we can overstate the impact that this disease, this pandemic, has had and continues to have. One of the things that we always say is that government has more power at its disposal. It has more that it can do than tax and spend. One of the issues we have with the last administration, as we know, was that they weren't really able to come up with much more than that. And one of the things we've always said is that government has all kinds of power. Government has the power to regulate, to legislate, and these aren't sexy things. Everybody always wants to know how much you're taxing and how much you're spending. But the truth is that the real power of a government is being able to figure out the things that can be done that don't call for any money. There's some things, of course, that do. We received 55,709 unemployment claims since COVID. I want you to let that number sink in. And we know that in that number there were some duplicates and so on. But we estimate that there are about 35,000 Barbadians who contribute to the NIS that have been made unemployed since COVID. 35,000 Barbadians. That is a quarter of the labor force. So, to be faced with a situation in your national insurance scheme where you have to pay claims to 35,000 people, that's not a small cost. And we've paid out to more than 93% of those people who are eligible. But one of the things that COVID showed us as well is how some of our systems are not really structured to deal with all of the different ways that people work, all the different situations in which people find themselves. And so with our mandate of enfranchisement in mind, we also had to quickly come up with a lot of other things. So we realized, for example, that there were people who contributed to the NIS but would not be eligible to get unemployment benefit because of their small business status or their self-employed status. And it's through no fault of their own. It's because they are classified as self-employed. And so we came up with the business interruption benefit. And you've all heard about all of the measures that we came up with to try and catch all of the people that otherwise would have slipped through. It is not enough to say, well, we settled the unemployment claims. We also had to look back at the people who didn't have enough contributions, who, because of their self-employed status, would not have been eligible. And we had to create the kinds of things that would mean that they would have some money in their pockets to buy food and to pay bills and to do what they needed to do. 1,347 people received $3,000 each under the business interruption benefit. So that means that to date we've paid $4 million for that particular measure. And the truth is, notwithstanding the very, very, very tight space we find ourselves in, we have to look at whether we're going to be able to keep something like that in place, because we can't have entire groups of people who just slip through the cracks. And that's one of the things that we realize through COVID. It has been a real challenge, but in a lot of ways, it has given us the opportunity to see the things that aren't working for people and to be able to fast track the things that we believe will work for people. Now, I tend not to like necessarily to come to you as people in St. Michael South Central, as constituents, as Barbadians, and just share with you a list of things that this government has done. But sometimes one feels compelled to do that because it is as if many, many people have forgotten where we were not 2.5 or less short years ago. And the truth is that COVID-19 has been the real test for this government to prove how ready it is to be able to respond to a crisis. So the Farmers Enfranchisement and Empowerment Drive that the Ministry of Agriculture launched brought back 750 acres of land into production because we had to. And part of that was to give regular people the opportunity to make money from farming those lands. The Agriculture Development Fund is another way that we've put money into agriculture and brought people back into agriculture. We have a new home building program that is about how we build and provide homes and services for people who otherwise would not be able to afford it. And I'll get into that a little bit later to show you how the Equity for All program allows us to build 2,000 homes for Barbadians who can then take that asset and do something with it. COVID-19 has also slowed us down in a few ways, and it has slowed down the entire world. Now, this again is not too sexy. Some of what I have to do in the ministry is not very sexy, but I do have a responsibility to say to all Barbadians that whereas we should have had a census this year in 2020, because we were getting ready for the census at the height of the COVID period, it means that the census year is now pushed to 2021. So it means that where we thought we were having a census in August 2020, and a census is where every 10 years, officers come and go to every house and every building and to every business and do a count and ask other information about people. So we were preparing for that when COVID hit. We were preparing for lots of things when COVID hit. And what it now means is that we had to push that back and be able to deliver the census in May 2021. And it means as well, everybody in here is wearing a mask. When people come to your home without a mask, I'm sure you stop them and say, hold on a minute. So it means as well that we have to find new ways to do the census. It means that we have to find new technology. It means that we might ask some of you to answer a call from us and give us some information on the phone, because it's about protecting people. It's about understanding that we got to use technology in places where we might have gone in person before, but we no longer can. But I also have to say something that's very important about this thing that we call a population and housing census. Government has to have information about people in order to come up with policy. I mean, when we reflect on anything that government is trying to do, and we think about whether it serves us or not, It is about whether government, ministries, officers that work in government had all the information. And the truth is that the census is the thing that allows us to do that. Now, under the Statistics Act, your information is confidential, your information is private, it can only be used in certain ways. But the reason I'm saying this here this evening is that I want people to understand that we need you in order to come up with policy that works for you. It is not about asking for information just to have it. It is about trying to find out things about health, about migration, about life expectancy, about disability, that will help us come up with good policy. Now, the government of Barbados put together about a year and a half ago a national population commission. And they've been doing tremendous work over the last few months. They've come up with a report. And the report is very sobering. And again, you know, some of this information sounds like things that might seem academic, but they're not. Because the number of people we have living here in Barbados to do the things that we need to do is the way that we will see development. The number of people we have here working, paying taxes, contributing to NIS, but also working in communities, volunteering, starting businesses and creating jobs, that's important. And the Population Commission told us that since 1980, fertility rates in Barbados have dipped below what we need to replace the population. So in simple language, the population is declining and we are not replacing it. I haven't replaced it so far, nor has Kathy or Simone. We have not done our part. Keep watching this space though. But it means that we're not replacing the population. That is critical. So the Population Commission's report tells us that the labor force is going to start declining from 2035. So the number of people that we have paying NIS contributions, the number of people that we have coming to work, the number of teachers that we have in schools, the number of people who are available to be police officers and maintain law and order, that is going to start declining in 15 years. That's just now. And it's not to cause alarm, but it is to say that all of these issues, how many people we have, how many people we need, these are things that are very important, and they may seem a little lofty, they may seem not that sexy, but they are critical to how we do our work. Now, unlike another fella who Barbadians have the misfortune to have representing them in the Ministry of Education some years ago, I'm not going to tell you that y'all should go out and start doing what would seem to be the natural thing to replace the population, as much fun as that might be for some of you. Changing reproductive behavior, it sounds obvious, but it's not the answer. The answer is really to talk about the policies that we need to do two things. One is to get every Barbadian who is here and every person who is here working and living the lives that they value. Because the truth is, a big issue with our productivity is not just about the numbers of the population, it's not just about the numbers who are here, but it's also about the extent to which we support people's capacity to be productive. It's about the extent to which we can help the private sector create jobs, but not only that, it's about the extent to which we can use programs like the National Transformation Initiative and the Youth Advanced Corps and others to make sure that people get the right training to be productive. I think one of the important conversations that we have to have as a people is not just about population, and the Population Commission is going to start doing their consultations. They're going to go around and hear from Barbadians. But one of the important conversations we have to have is about opportunity. It's about the fact that it is not enough to leave school and think that the next step is to somehow magically end up working. I think one of the conversations we have to have with our young people is that they have to determine the path that they want to live. That's one of the things the Youth Advance Corps aims to do. That's one of the things the National Transformation Initiative aims to do. To not be shy about saying, if you want to earn an income to support your family, you have to acquire the skills and the experience to do that. You got to go and learn how to do something. So a lot of this work that is around population has to do with a couple things. One is using and making sure that we give real opportunity to the population we currently have here that may not be as productive as we want. And secondly, to see how we can welcome and encourage others to come in and create jobs and collaborate with Barbadians to create opportunities for those who already live here. This conversation is about improving the lives and well-being of Barbadian people. So I don't want us to get nervous about the conversation. It is important, because if we keep going at this rate, soon we'll look around, and there won't be enough people, there won't be enough hands to create the change that we know we need to be able to see. Now, one of the important things, apart from this work on population, apart from measuring and data and these kinds of things that we have to do and that we continue to do, is look at how we use government as a tool to make people's lives easier. So not just about tax and spend, but how do we use regulation and how do we use legislation to make people's lives easier. We set a target to be 100% carbon neutral, or not use any fossil fuels, use all renewable energy by 2030. And it's a difficult task. But one of the things that we spend a lot of time doing is looking at how do we reach that goal by allowing Barbadians to be a part of that goal. You know, there is a narrative about who is the government of enfranchisement. And I don't even think it's a debate that needs to be had. Because every successive Barbados Labour Party government has not kicked the can down the road, but run like bolt with the mandate of empowering and enfranchising regular Barbadians. So it's not really a debate that I intend to have, except to say that we are in a new generation of enfranchisement. We used to talk about giving people a piece of the rock, and we've done a lot to do that. But more and more we know that we need to give Barbadians a piece of the action. The world is changing. It's not just about having something brick and mortar that you can have and that you can look at and that you can leave. That is important. But we realize now more and more that investment opportunities are all around us. And do not allow anybody to tell you that the only people who can invest are people who already have money. The real value in investment is for regular Barbadians to be able to use their savings that are getting less than 0.1% interest in a commercial bank and put it into something that can earn something for your children, Romano, when you have them. It's an important conversation, and that's the reason that we have put minimum requirements for local ownership around the strategic industries that matter to us and that we believe are going to provide opportunities for Barbadians. So we've said that when it comes to medicinal cannabis, any company that sets up here has to have 30% ownership by Barbadians. When it comes to renewable energy, we've said that any company that sets up here has to have 30% ownership by Barbadians. And I want you to stop a minute and think about what that means. Because the idle accusations and the idle suggestion that this Barbados Labour Party administration is not about enfranchisement is put to rest when we consider that for any company to come here or anybody to set up anything here in medicinal cannabis or in renewable energy, so solar, wind, anything that is going to drive that target that we've set, it has to be 30% owned by Barbadians. It means that Barbadians have the opportunity to take their savings out of the bank, where it isn't earning much, and to put it into something that is going to earn and that their children are going to be able to be a part of. Now, I know y'all are going to let me know when I'm close to time, because I really don't want to go on too long. But I do have to say something that I've reflected on for a long time over the past few weeks. I think we have developed a bit of a lazy narrative in some cases that suits certain people's political purposes, but that cheapens the fact that regular Barbadian people are looking for a way to do better for themselves. And I'm going to tell you what I mean. We've been looking to use regulation and legislation to provide opportunities for people. So, traditionally, the way that government has worked is that people had to understand government in order to get anything done. So you had to know what time something opened, what time it closed, what the rules were. And I don't know if you remember this or if you feel this now, but you almost had to feel like you had to be an expert in every agency. Simone knows what I mean, because she is. You almost felt as if you had to spend a lot of time learning systems, and you were working for the system rather than having the system work for you. A big part of what we have to do to give people back their power, give people back their time, is to make it easier for people to do things. And that is part of the broader enfranchisement program as well. Because the longer that you take to stand up in a line to do something that you have to do, the less time you have to go and do something that you need to do. The less time you have to earn money, the less time you have to do homework with your children. And a big part of what government has to do is to be able to make that better. A part of what we started to try and make that better was with the new planning and development legislation. Now, I'm going to spend a little time on this one. Not too much time, but some things have to be said. And I'm talking now to you all in here because this is something that affects anyone who ever plans to build a shop, to build a house, to do a renovation, to build a hotel, because some of y'all in here could do that, to do anything that requires you to get permission to do. So indulge me if I take a little time to clarify some things that people use, quite frankly, for their own political gain. Because it is easy for people to jump up, not understanding, not clear, and not willing to ask questions, as we saw when the legislation reached the upper house some weeks ago. But wanting to stir up people who already have a lot going on for their own purposes. Now, transformation requires calm. It requires listening voices. It cannot take hold in chaos. And so sometimes one has to let the chaos subside to have a level-headed conversation. And I will tell you honestly that this is not an adamant government. This Barbados Labour Party government, unlike the last, is not adamant. We're not here to bang a gavel and say it is so. And every process that we have gone through since May 2018 bears that out. No process bears that out more than the town planning reform that we started in June in 2018. before we came to service as a government, one of the biggest complaints that we heard, man, when you're going to planning, man, is saying a thing in there and it's take years, and that's the biggest complaint that we heard when we came and we asked people, what would it take to get investment going? And I'm not just talking about big hotels. I'm talking about people who want to put up a shop, who want to put up a daycare, like the young lady who wrote me some months ago at her wit's end because she couldn't get it done. And it had been in there for years prior to our administration. The single biggest problem at that time, and what we knew we had to address in order to drive growth and investment that is led by regular Barbadians, was to address the town planning process and the town planning law. It's a law that was 53 years old. But 53 years before that, that law was not about us. That law was not about people that look like you and me. That was about maintaining power in the hands of a certain group of people who always had it. So how could it possibly serve us today? Barbadians agreed with us, and we had consultations. And we passed a Planning and Development Act in January 2019. And I want y'all to listen to me, because I want us to understand the process of consultation and listening to Barbadians that got us where we are today. We came on the basis of talking to stakeholders, and hundreds of people came to talk with us. Thousands more were engaged through social media. We had a green paper that we got comments on. We had a white paper that we laid in Parliament and we got more debate about. Up to this day, people are still giving feedback and engaging with us about process and about their observations and their own experience of the system. I have never been a part of a consultation or a consultative process that has been that thorough, but it had to be done, because it wasn't just about draftsmen and architects and developers. It was about me and you and the people who walk in the town planning department every day and need something done. So in January 2019, we passed an act. And it did a lot of things. First of all, it imposed penalties on us for taking too long with your application. It introduced a new provision that meant that what we call provisional refusal, if we have to tell you no to something, that we also tell you what change to your application would allow us to tell you yes. So that it meant that the town planning department was not just a regulator to say yes, no, go along home now. It meant that we were facilitators of sustainable development. That act at the time allowed for people to go and search to see what approvals were granted, to see what applications were before us. It allowed for wider consultation so that if a development is going up, that people can have their say. It allowed for us to make sure that we retained certain uniquely Barbadian things, like windows to the sea and so on. And so that passed in January 2019. It wasn't proclaimed at the time. And I want to say something for the writers of editorials who would want to hold forth to us in their learned way, but don't have all the facts clearly. Now, I am out here busy doing work. I don't have all the time to appear as learned as they might. But I want to clarify that an act becomes law when it passes the lower house. I got lawyers here to help me. When it passes the upper house, and when it is signed by the Governor General, and then proclaimed. Thanks, Natasha. So the fact that legislation passes the Senate does not make it law. There is a step that we have to take to proclaim the legislation. Now, in January last year, we did not proclaim the Planning and Development Act, and I'll tell you why. It doesn't make sense to put something into law when you don't have all the systems to make it work. Well, I just come in to frustrate you more. I made something law I don't have all the staff to do it. I don't have the office to do it. I don't have the planning and development board to replace the chief town planner to make things more transparent. I don't have the tribunal. I don't have all of the things that are required at law, but I'm gonna go and pass on that and make your lives miserable in a different way. So we didn't proclaim it at the time because we had to get everything we needed to do in order. In the meantime, we got more feedback. And the feedback said to us, but wait. I like this town plan, this new planning and development act a lot. But you know what the problem is? The problem is that when I go and get planning permission, they're gonna send me now to Environmental Protection Department to get a building approval. And then I gotta go to somebody called the Building Standards Authority for them to tell me more things. So my planning permission means that I can't start building anything. People came back and told us that. They said, why you input the building approval that EPD does and all the things that building authority tells you, by the way, why did you not put that in the new legislation so that I only have one place to go? Enfranchisement is also about making people's lives easier, saving time that people can use to do other important things. So we said, all right, in the spirit of consultation, in the spirit of listening to Barbadians, which is what we came to service to do, we're gonna go back at it. And we had more consultations in July 2019. And I want the editorial writers to listen. We had more consultations. And everybody who was there said, we want something called a one-stop shop. Sounds good, right? One place to go. We want a one-stop shop that is going to look at town planning approval, that is going to deal with what environmental protection does under the health services regulations, and that's going to deal with the building authority. And we said, no problem. We went back out to talk to people about it. We met with draftsmen, we met with architects, we met with users of the system. And we sat down and put together what they thought would make sense. Beforehand, what you needed to do was, once you got a planning approval, if you're building a simple house, the person that in town planning that gave you the approval would send you to EPD. That is how it is today. That is how it was before the legislation was passed. Having to go and get a little certificate that says you're approved, your building meets certain specifications as you've laid out to us for health and safety and so on, building standards dealt with fire. You always had to do that. The change brought that into planning. Now, the idea, the intent and the spirit, and really, if we get it right, is to speed up the approval of land and building development projects of all sizes, hotels to houses to shops to salons. But it's also to ensure that building standards that are appropriate for us, for our climate, for our country, for our culture, for the way we live, to make sure that we build to standards. We just had Gonzalo pass. And again, you know, it's no wonder people believe that God is a Bajan. But climate change and the fact that we get all of these stronger and more devastating hurricanes is not a joke. It is a real thing. And I'll tell you what, and I'm talking to you now because I'm talking to my people. I'll tell you what really I found unconscionable about a lot of the narrative that was put out there. It is this idea that people who don't have much don't deserve much. I'll explain what I mean. It is highly possible for somebody with not much money to build a home that meets certain specifications that will keep them safe and to keep their asset as one that they can continue to use. So all the people who would rail on about how poor people cannot do this and poor people cannot do that, why is it that we feel that we can hold up this group of people that we call poor people and not want them to have things that will last, that in which they will be safe, not want them to be a part of the orderly development of the country? If we have not come to service for that, what have we come to service for? To keep people on the fringes and on the margins? I just talked about the fact that we are creating opportunities for people to put a solar PV panel on their house, or several, and then to generate that electricity and sell it into the grid and make some money. Now, if you want to be able to do that, it means that your house has to be strong enough to be able to do that. It means that if you want to use that house as that asset to continue to make money, I don't care where you're from. I don't care if you're from Lanes Road in Clapham or Lanes Road in Bannister Land. I don't care if you're from Haggett Hall, if you're from Hinesbury Road. I don't care what part of Carrington Village you're from. Who is to tell you that you cannot build a property, build a home or shop or business that allows you to be part of that 30% local ownership that we have been talking about? So I want to make a couple things clear about this legislation. You know, we all have moments in our political life, forgive me for talking to you straight, but this is Marsha talking to you, where we feel like, what? Y'all know me? I would have, and I gotta say this in here because I probably can't say it on the floor of Parliament, I would have to be mad as a girl who grew up in St. Clair Road in a 2-bedroom board house where my parents had to build on a water toilet at the back, to tell people you have to move out of your house to build on a toilet. I would have to be mad. In what reality would any government, well, maybe the last ones, but certainly not this one, bring that madness to the people of Barbados? There is no place in the new planning legislation that says to Barbadians, if you are doing a renovation, if you are changing your kitchen, if you are building on a bedroom, you have to leave home until you get a certificate. There is no language in that act that says that. Now, as I said before, we are not an adamant government. And people call me. People said, but you know, I find the language a little ambiguous. I find that if you had said it this way, it would be clear for us to understand. And that's the reason that we paused. The reason that we paused is because it is important to us, and in fact, I ain't even talking about us, it is important to me, to Marsha Caddle, to make sure that people are a part of what we're doing, to make sure that we bring everybody along in what we are doing. And that is why this government has been the most consultative, has been the most communicative. Where you can't stop seeing the Prime Minister when you turn on your phone. You can't stop seeing the ministers when you turn on your phone or turn on the TV. Because our job is about talking people through, talking with and listening. So I wrote something to share with everybody, because the truth is, this is a very thorough act. And we're going to post the clarifications. But I just want it to be clear that the certificate that you get for building approval, or to show that your house is safe, that you now get from town planning, is the same one that you always got since 1969 under the old act. All we've done is try to make sure that you don't have to go 4 or 5 different places to get it. But I also want us to understand that countries around us are losing people and homes to natural disasters. And the first homes and the first people that go are people who don't have a lot, are poor people. And I didn't come here to maintain the status quo. There is no extra cost. There is no extra burden involved. And if you have a simple application, getting that completion certificate that says your house is good to go and is in order to put on solar PV, to put on battery storage, to put on any other thing that can earn you an income for you and your children. But I want to come to another part that came up in the discussions. And it is that there's now a 2-part process for the planning applications. So you start with the planning approval and then you go to the building approval. And the draftsmen that we met with over and over and over, and that we met with since the new act was passed, can do now what draftsmen have always done in drafting plans for simple applications. What we've done is move the burden to show that the plans are compliant at the building approval stage to professional engineers and architects and people who have to have professional indemnity insurance to say that when they certify that your house is fit for you to occupy, that they're telling the truth. We've seen with commercial properties, with others, that there have been people that have had fires that have taken lives, that people have lost their homes, uninsured properties, with all of their possessions. And we need to get away from this notion that somehow poor people are to be excluded from the protection that the state offers. That is not at all the case. Our job is to make it easy. It's not to create extra burden. But it breaks my heart every time I hear a home lost to fire for something that could have been avoided. And the people had no insurance. It broke my heart to see all of those homes that were lost in Dominica and Barbados and other places, because somehow we feel that this notion of having a building code for homes that regular people live in is too fancy for us. It's not fancy. It is protecting lives and livelihoods. That is what I came to political service to do. And it is very politically expedient for people to hold up this group that they call poor people and say poor people this and poor people that, but they never had a day of poverty in their lives. And so we said that we would hold on proclaiming the legislation. Some people said to us that the act, they find, does not make a sufficient distinction between major renovations that could put people in danger, large commercial buildings and so on, and that require a certificate, and the other ongoing home improvements that don't require a certificate. And so we said, okay, we're not going to proclaim that part of the legislation. And what we're going to spend the next weeks doing is making the relevant language clearer. We're going to spend the next few weeks sharing with the public all the regulations that set out the role of draftsmen and the role of other professionals. Most importantly, we're going to go back to have the broad-based consultations that we started having. That people started saying, oh shoot, yeah, we know, you don't got to invite us all the time, we hear, we watch. We're going to go back. You can get tired of me. Because it is not so much that we cannot correct. This is a government that doesn't have any ego about correcting, about listening and changing and going back. We don't have any ego about that. But the important thing is to make sure that people have the facts and that there's not a fog created for other people to benefit from. So it is worth it for us to pause while we bring everybody along. Because this is everyone's Barbados. Everyone has to feel a part and be a part of what we do. But I had to wait for some of the dust and the nonsense to settle to be able to make the clarification. And don't get me wrong, I think in a lot of cases, it was genuine misunderstanding for people who wanted to understand. And for people who want to understand, I will never get tired of talking and explaining. Because we can't take for granted the role that we play in trying to make people's lives easier. But the only thing I came here to tell you this evening is that we never thought that we would be in this kind of situation. And I'll tell you that we got the reserves up past 2.1 billion, the highest they've ever been. And we were busy doing a lot of the work at that macro level, but also on the ground to try and put people in a better position. One of the reasons that we're launching the National Digital ID Program is that we want to make people's lives easier. We want to make sure that people can have everything they need in one place. Government is not just about tax and spend. It's about the little things, the regulations, the process, the fact that you don't want people standing in long lines, or we've put the police certificate of character online. A lot of what people missed in all of this planning conversation is the fact that a lot of what we are asking for people to do, you won't even have to get up and leave home to do it. So COVID-19 has been a wake-up call for all of us. And, you know, a lot of what this branch has to do, and this is something that I said 3 years ago, is that we are going to take some time to recover. We had a disaster that nobody could have ever predicted. I mean, nobody could have predicted. We put natural disaster clauses in our new bonds that we issued to say that if we have a natural disaster, we're going to get 2 years before we have to pay back our debt. And we thought that that was enough. And then came a pandemic. And then we realized, oh, we got to put in a pandemic clause too next time. We don't know what else we got to put in. The fact is that nobody could have predicted it. And I'm not one for, you know, this is self-praise and appraise. But the truth is that when you look around, when you look at your phone and you see all of the comparisons of Barbados to other places, the response, the fact that we've been able to find that balance of keeping Barbadians and people who live here safe and healthy, while also trying to make sure that we get enough in to keep the economy turning around. Not many have been able to do that. But we can't rest. We don't rest. We have a lot more work to do. And I've always said that a lot of the work we have to do in times like this is to start right here in communities, to try and make sure that our young people understand the opportunities, access the opportunities. And it means that this new executive and this revived and reinvigorated branch are going to have a lot of work to do. Just like NIS saw so many claims, we, in every constituency across the island, we have seen how people need support. It has caused us to change the way we do a lot of things. It has caused us to change the kinds of benefits that people get on welfare, but it has also caused us to realize that we need to improve response, the quality of the response, the timeliness of the response. And that's what this kind of legislation is about. That's what making changes to the NIS so that we pay it directly to people's bank accounts and not by check. That's what that's about. That's what the work of the Ministry of Innovation and their digital ambassadors that they're using to help. That's what the modernization program that's funded by the IDB, that's what all these things are about. And I want us not to think that these are things that don't affect us. They affect us, and they're things that government is doing for all. So I'm going to close by saying that we remain committed. We have a renewed commitment, because the worst thing to put in front of me is a problem. Because on behalf of the people who put me here, I have to make sure that with your help it is solved. And I want to thank you again for the opportunity to do that. And I want to thank those of you who are helping me to be able to continue to do that. Good evening to everyone.